Hello, my name's Jackie and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I want to start outlining my next project. So I do already have an idea. It started with a dream maybe a month or two ago where the characters were like wandering through a landscape that looked like the swamp of despair from the Never-Ending Story. So swampy, muddy, all of these dead trees with no leaves. And they were walking through this landscape and suddenly the texture of the ground underneath their feet changed and they looked up and everything in front of them had been transformed into glass. And I just really love that image and I thought, oh, that'd be really cool. Like, what if we have something about some sort of witch who, she can touch things and turn them completely into glass. So that was the first idea. Then a couple of weeks ago, I was just mulling over this, thinking like, what sort of world would this glass witch character be in? And I had another idea about an apprentice glass blower in like Renaissance Venice. And one day she goes to a gallery or museum. I need to do some research to see if galleries and museums were a thing back then. And she sees a life-size statue of a girl that's completely glass and it looks like it's all one piece, and she is just entranced by this statue. She doesn't know where it came from, how it's possible, and she decides she needs to find the person who made this. She needs to find out who they are and how they did it. So that's what I've got at the moment, something in like Renaissance Venice with a glass-blowing apprentice, and she wants to find this person who made the statue who at this stage she doesn't realize they're a witch. So I've already got a lot of imagery but no story, which is where outlining can help. Now, rather than trying a new method this time around, I thought I'd just take all of the favorite exercises I have from the different methods I've tried. So on the table behind me, I have my stack of different craft books that I have here, and I'm just going to go through some of the different exercises to see if they can help me flesh out this story a little bit more, because it's time. I'd really like to start writing something new, and I feel like, downside, this is nothing like Powerless, so I don't know if the same agent or publisher would be interested, but I know I really like doing something that has sort of this old world fairy tale type of feel, so we'll see how it goes. Of the different craft books I have, I will not be using all of them because there are some that I just didn't like, so nothing from StoryGrid, nothing from Snowflake Method. I also have one called The Plot Whisperer, which I've started reading a couple of times but just have never gotten through, so not that either. So that leaves Take Off Your Pants, Save the Cat, Anatomy of Story, Story Engineering, and the Story Clock Workbook. And I think there might be things in each of these I want to use. So the first one is Take Off Your Pants, which was actually the first plotting book I tried back when I was writing Powerless. And I didn't really love the plot structure of this, but one of the things I did love was the story core exercise, and this is a way of almost being able to summarize your story in one sentence. So there are 5 different points that you need to complete, and what it says is every compelling story has the following 5 elements. A character. The character wants something, but something prevents him from getting what he wants easily, so he struggles against that force and either succeeds or fails. So in my case, my character is an apprentice glassblower in Renaissance Venice. She wants... Okay, this is where I struggle a little bit, and this comes up for me with a lot of different outlining methods. The reason I'm hesitating is because is it what the character wants in general, or is it what they want in their story? Because what my characters generally want at the beginning of their stories is different to the goal of the book. Like at the beginning of the story, they're established as having some sort of general life goal or ambition or purpose that they want to achieve, but then whatever happens in the book, it might get in the way of that, it might interrupt that, it might be a step on the way to getting that bigger purpose, mission, goal, whatever. So in this case, I think ultimately what she wants is to be a famous artisan. I like the idea of her liking the idea of people coming from all across Europe to commission goods from her or to see her art or to buy her work. So I think that'd be fun for her to be really ambitious. She wants to be the world's best glass artisan. That's not what she wants in the book, though. In the book, she wants to find the person who made this sculpture or this glass statue of a girl. I'm not sure whether I should start this with the first goal, because if it's the character, what she wants is to be famous glass artisan, something prevents her from getting what she wants, well, that could be, if she's an apprentice at the beginning of the book, that means she has a master glass person. Clearly, I need to research this. I know nothing about glass blowing and yeah, anything. The only reason it's in Venice is because I know that they had a huge glass trade, so I thought it was fitting. I've also visited Venice a long time ago now, 15 years ago, but I visited Venice a long time ago and loved it, so it would be fun to set a book there. So I assume she'll have some sort of master whose role I need to research. So she wants to be famous. She's got this master who's sort of stopping her from moving forward. So she'll struggle against him and either succeeds or fails. So in her case, we're hoping she succeeds because she's our main character. Now, that all works, but that would just be my first act because that doesn't get us to what she wants in the book. So if I do what she wants in the book, we have the character, our apprentice glassmaker. She wants something. She wants to find the person who created this mysterious statue. She can't figure out how it was made. Something prevents her from getting what she wants. So that again, it could be the master glassmith. Is glassmith a word? I really need to look up what glass people are called. So maybe he's not letting her leave, like she'll lose her position if she goes looking for this person. Maybe what's getting in her way is just that they don't know who made this, so where do you start? So she struggles. It's either struggling against the master or just the general struggle of finding someone who doesn't want to be found, and then succeeds or fails. The thing is, she succeeds or fails, but I don't think it's going to be the end of the book when she meets the glass witch. And for anyone who watches Lindsay Puckett's videos, I know she has a middle grade book called The Glass Witch. I'm going to try not to call mine that or call this character that, but it's the easiest way to communicate what's going on at the moment. Yeah, even if I do the general goal of the book, it still changes. I'm trying to think of what I did for Powerless, because Powerless, the original goal was about Hannah being accepted by her father, which worked because it didn't actually focus on the plot at all. So maybe it should focus on her being like this famous glassmaker. It's just this point 3 with something preventing her from getting what she wants. To me, that sounds like it would be the main antagonistic force of the book. And I don't know if I want like this master glassmith to be the main antagonist, like he's just the initial one. I don't actually see him like following her out of Venice as she goes on her quest. So I need to think about this a little more. What this reminds me of though is Dan Harmon's Story Circle. So this is another method where I haven't actually used it, but I do have this story clock workbook, which does a similar thing where you use this circle diagram to organize your story. So Dan Harmon, who, if you don't know, he created Community and Rick and Morty, he has this circle which is split into 8 slices. So the first one is you, as in the character and their comfort zone. The next one is they have like a need or a desire. Then they go into an unfamiliar situation, they learn to adapt to that situation, they get what they want, or at least they think they get what they want, but then there's a price to pay for getting what they wanted. They return home having changed. So there's this cyclical element to his stories. It's very much like the hero's journey, just simplified. Now, Tyler Mowry, who's a screenwriter, he did a video, I think last year, where he attempted to write a screenplay in 48 hours, and he actually used this story circle method. But rather than just using the story circle for the entire story, he did like a circle for each part of the play. I think he did 3 or 4. So it may have been Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, or Part 1, 2, 3, and 4. What this StoryCorps exercise is reminding me of is like that circle where in each key part of the story you could actually do the whole cycle again, because each one the character has a new goal that they want to achieve. So I'm wondering if maybe I try doing the StoryCorps for each of the different stages of the book, or if I try doing the story circle for each of the parts of the book. Something to think about. So this is making me wonder, like, do I need to do the full method again? Like, is it just not going to work if I jump in and do just the exercise I liked? But we'll see. Anyway, the next one I wanted to do was the Save the Cat beat sheet. So I'll quickly look at that now and then come back.
Many minutes later.
Okay, I'm back. So the next method I'm looking at is the Save the Cat beat sheet. So the beat sheet is like the most famous thing that Save the Cat is known for, even though it's this full methodology. The beat sheet is basically 15 different beats that your story should hit in order to feel complete and have like a complete plot. And in theory, every single good story or good screenplay would hit these 15 beats. So the beats are opening image, so where the story starts, theme stated, So this is like the theme of the story. So what's coming to me is Disney's Beauty and the Beast, the original, not the 2017 flop. And the theme of that is beauty is found within. Setup. So setup is pages 1 to 10 in a screenplay. Let's say the first 10 to 15% of a novel. And that's everything about like your character before the story starts. So what's a day in their life like? What are their goals? What are their struggles? Who are the people in their everyday life, etc. Then we have the catalyst. This is the event that sets the story in motion. Depending on the method you use and the terminology that method uses, this might also be called the inciting incident. It might also be called the turning point. After the catalyst happens, one of the things that Save the Cat has, which is quite interesting, is a debate. So this is where the characters are like talking about if they should go on the mission, if you like, if they should accept the call to adventure, if we're using Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. They might also be talking about how to get started. So this is between when the catalyst happens and when they set off on the journey or the adventure or whatever it is. And yeah, they're figuring out if they should or how they should. Then we have break into 2. So that means break into Act 2, and that's where like the adventure starts. Now, from here, the beat sheet falls apart a little bit because those first 6 beats are like the first 25 pages of the screenplay. So that's about 25% of the screenplay. And you can structure it fairly completely just having those beats, though you might want to flesh them out. Then we have from page 25 to page 75, so twice the amount of space, we only have 4 more beats. So if people are just following this and have no other like craft books or structures that they're following, I can see why Act 2 is such a struggle because there's not a lot of guidance. So what we have here is B story, which is usually a romance or a friendship or something that happens alongside the main story. I don't love B stories, to be honest. Like maybe because like I get so like focused, I only really can focus on one thing at a time. So I just like to have one story. There's fun and games, which Blake Snyder describes as like all of the fun stuff that would happen in the trailer for a movie. So things like car chases or puzzles or, I don't know, recruiting the heist crew, like that sort of stuff. It's very hard to get guidance on that though because it is so different for every story. So this is one of the reasons why this part of the beat sheet is a little weak in my opinion. Then we have the midpoint, so that's the 50% moment of the screenplay or the story. Usually something changes at that point, so the main character will get some new information that they're able to use to achieve their goal, defeat the bad guy, etc. They might also discover that their assumptions up till now have been wrong, so this is the moment like everything changes, either for better or for worse. Then bad guys close in. So this is when we see like the bad guys plotting and closing in on the main character. All is Lost moment and Dark Night of the Soul happen together, so this is when everything feels hopeless. It looks like there's no way the hero will be able to recover from this. Break into 3, this is break into Act 3. It's usually the 75% mark of the story. Break into 3 and the finale both start at the same point. This is like the big climax of the book. So if it's a romance, this is when they're making the big romantic gestures to win the person back. If it's some sort of adventure or sci-fi or fantasy type book, it's probably an epic battle. So this is like the big showstopper. And then final image, so the scene that the story ends on. So for me, what I've got is opening image is her working in the glass studio, workshop, whatever it's called. The theme stated, I'm not sure what it is. I think it will be something about beauty, and that's not just because I'm thinking about Beauty and the Beast, but I think because there's, you know, this statue that she sees, which is so beautiful, and she's an artist, so she's chasing beauty, yet we discover that there is this witch who transforms things, and that statue was probably a real girl at some point. So something about the dark side of beauty, maybe. I think I'll see what comes out in the writing. Then the setup, so she works in a glass workshop, wants to be a famous artisan. She's talented, but there's definitely room for improvement. The catalyst is she sees the statue of the girl and she wants to find out who made it. Debate, some of the things I thought it could be about is like, how do they track down this person? They don't even have a name for the statue, so who knows who made it. Also, the risk she'll lose her apprenticeship if she leaves. The master is not going to forgive her if she disappears. Maybe I could create some stakes around this. Like, again, I need to do research, but maybe there's like some event where he's going to be displaying his work, or maybe there's a big order coming in and he needs all hands on deck. So I'll make a note of that. Okay, so it's going to be, if she leaves, she'll lose the apprenticeship, but also that this is the worst time to leave. It's the one time the master really needs all hands on deck. There could also be stuff with her family, like how can you abandon something you've worked so hard for? I don't know if this is like a sponsored thing, so they need to pay for her to do the apprenticeship. So almost like this moment she would be throwing away everything she'd worked so hard for. She's burning all of the bridges for a dream. Like she doesn't even know where she's going and how she's going to find this person who made the statue. Break into 2 will be leaving on the search and abandoning her apprenticeship. B story, no idea. Like, I suppose I could put a romance in there, but I don't know if I want to. So fun and games, again, not sure. Like, there's that image of the swamp that's been turned entirely into glass. I also thought maybe she could find the witch, but she needs to sort of pass some trials in order to meet her, or do some riddles or something, because that's very fairy tale-like. So still a bit up in the air. And then the midpoint is when she gets like accepted by the witch and almost maybe gets apprenticed to the witch. I'm not quite sure what the dynamic's going to be like. After this is when things fall apart. So bad guys close in. Who are the bad guys? Like, I have no idea who the bad guys are. It could be like maybe they're being followed because the master wants access to the witch's skills, or maybe people do know about the witch. Like the older people know about the witch, it's just she doesn't. So they want to like go and hunt down the witch. I don't know. Or if the witch is the bad guy, then I don't know how this bad guys close in thing works because they're together. The biggest question is the witch the ultimate antagonist, or is it someone else like the master? Yeah, just lots of questions at the moment. And then all is lost. Like, this sort of depends on who the bad guys are. So all is lost. If the bad guys are people coming to hunt the witch, maybe it's that the witch is killed. Maybe the witch gives our main character, like she passes on her powers or something. Like maybe the witch was luring someone to her so she could get rid of the powers, because it's more like a curse than a gift. And now the main character, maybe everything she touches turns to glass, like it's like the hand of Midas. I don't know, like everything from the midpoint's a bit up in the air. I'm not too worried though, because I remember the first time I did the beat sheet with Powerless and the other books I was working on, it was very similar. Like my setup and Act 1 was, it wasn't completely mapped out, but the overall arc was there. And I had a few beats to get to the midpoint, and then I wasn't quite sure what would happen. So yeah, clearly I need to think about this a little bit more. And I think I need to think about this a little bit more before I do other exercises. I have a feeling if I move on to other exercises, I'm just going to run into the same questions. So I'm going to call it a day and then pick this up in another day or 2. Hello, I've got a fairly busy week this week with stuff on almost every night, so I thought I'd quickly touch base in the office since I'm on my own today and let you know that I had an idea. So when I was first working on my beat sheet, things got a bit muddy after the midpoint, and I wasn't sure like who the main bad guy would be, or, well, that was really it. I wasn't sure who the main bad guy would be. So what I've decided is both the Glass Witch and the Glass Master are going to be antagonists. Obviously their stories start at different points because they are introduced at different points in the book, but I think it can all like culminate in the finale, which I've decided is going to happen at Carnival in Venice. So I'm really excited about that. And other than that, one of the things I'm really enjoying about working on a new project is going through this discovery process where you don't have all the answers at the beginning, but it's okay, because every time you go back to the beat sheet, you build on it a little bit more, and then suddenly there's this story like forming in front of you. So it's just exciting and fun, and it's really nice to be having fun again, because Fantasy Hot Mess was not fun. So unfortunately, because I've got so much on this week, I'm probably not going to be able to get back to it until Friday, but I am letting things marinate, so hopefully Friday will be a productive session when I get back to finishing my beat sheet and then doing story engineering. It's now been another few days and I'm looking at the beat sheet for my new book again. And when I was looking at it a couple of days ago, I can't remember what I googled, but I googled something and the Save the Cat blog came up, which had a beat sheet for Pixar's Soul, which I saw very recently and loved. And when I looked at the beat sheet, it was really useful because I could see how everything applied to an existing story I was already familiar with, but also seeing the level of detail it went into was really helpful, because when I was doing my beat sheet, it was sort of like one line for each beat, whereas here you had like a paragraph or two, so they were actually almost mini scene outlines or mini scene summaries. So I thought I'd look at some more of the beat sheets they have on the website for stories I'm familiar with and see if that helped spark some more inspiration. And it was an interesting exercise, but it actually reminded me of some of the things I've struggled with the Save the Cat beat sheet. So one of them is the whole fun and games section I mentioned earlier in this video, I believe. You know, in the book it's described as all the things you see in the trailer, all the things you would expect someone to get up to in this genre of story. So if it's like a body switching story, you'd expect all these humorous situations where they're trying to be the other person or the thing whose body they're in. But the more beat sheets I read, the more it just seems to be, this is whatever happens to happen in between the break into Act 2 and the midpoint. There doesn't really seem to be much guidance beyond that. So I found the more beat sheets I looked at, the less helpful it was. Because it's so unique to each story, there's no real guidance for what should happen. The next thing that I found was quite interesting is in the beat sheet, the antagonist often isn't mentioned until like the second half of the book. So sometimes they're not introduced until the midpoint and we see them in the bad guys close in beat. Yeah, sometimes we don't see them until the bad guys close in beat. It's like, oh, there were bad guys this entire time. So I find that really interesting, especially after looking at other methods like the anatomy of story, where the opponent is such a big part of the method, and the way you design a story is supposed to be around the relationship between your protagonist and your opponent. And I think the final thing that I noticed is pretty much any craft book or method, no one seems to be willing to admit that their method might not work in all cases. And I think that's clear when I look at some of the beat sheets. It's like, okay, you've gone with like the exact times in the movie when stuff is supposed to happen and sort of tried to shoehorn it into the beat sheet, but it might not work exactly. And the one example that prompted this realization was Beauty and the Beast, the 1991 one, because in the Beauty and the Beast beat sheet, they say the midpoint is when Belle sneaks into the West Wing. And while technically that might be at the halfway point of the movie, the midpoint isn't just about what happens at the exact 50% mark. It's also supposed to be a shift in the story where there's some shift, there's some new information, something changes the path that the story's going down. So for me, regardless of the exact time when it takes place, I feel like that would be the "there's something there that wasn't there before" song, because that's the moment when Belle and the Beast relationship shifts. Or even before that, like after she goes to the West Wing and gets in trouble and she runs out of the castle, he saves her, and then they have that interaction after he saves her where, you know, he's saying, you shouldn't have run away, she's like, you shouldn't have frightened me, and they sort of grumble, and at the end she goes, well, thank you for saving my life. And that's the moment their relationship changes. Now the sneaking into the West Wing is a lead up to that. It's part of the sequence of events that leads up to that, but the actual midpoint is when the relationship shifts. Whereas in this beat sheet, they've just got the bit when she sneaks into the West Wing and he gets angry at her, which I don't feel like, again, it might be the exact midpoint as far as time goes, but as far as story goes, nothing shifts in that moment. The dynamic is exactly the same as it's been until this point. And because they've said that as a midpoint, for bad guys closing in, they've actually listed there's something there that wasn't there before as part of bad guys closing in, which doesn't make sense. Like, they've sort of tried to justify it as their inner bad guys are present because they're both a little scared, neither one prepared. I don't know, maybe if you think that makes sense, leave your thoughts in the comments, but I really feel like, you know, that is the midpoint shift, and bad guys is more on like the Gaston and them trying to storm the castle type of thing. So after that ramble, I realized that I think I've probably gotten as far as I'm going to for the time being with the Save the Cat beat sheet, just because I'm running into the challenges that come up with it when you've got this list of beats you need to hit, but some of them do just feel like they're taking up space to fill the right part of the screenplay or the book. Like, bad guys closes in, we need something here, so just think of something with the bad guys. Fun and games, we need something here to take up some space. Think of some interesting things that might happen in your story. And if you come at it from that angle, I think it's very easy to just think of random stuff to fill the space. By contrast, I feel like story engineering has more of a cause and effect approach. So now I'm going to be moving on to story engineering, which is somewhere in my pile of books here. Oh, there we go. Story engineering can be a little bit tiresome to read, admittedly, but I really like the approach to structure. Basically, Larry Brooks divides books into 4 parts, and I've always preferred that to the 3-act structure just because I think if something's divided into 3 parts, there should be 3 equal parts. And most of the time, Act 1 seems to be 25%, Act 2 seems to be 25 to 75%, and then Act 3 is the final quarter. So why not just have 4 parts? So he has 4 parts, and they each have like a certain flavor. So part 1 is like the setup, we're getting to know the world, we're getting to know the characters. Then at the 20 to 25% mark, we have a turning point that pushes the main character into the story world. So this is what sets them off on their adventure or journey. And then part 2 is the response. So a lot of that is the main character reacting to or responding to whatever happened in that turning point moment. So this is when they're running, planning, trying to figure out what to do next. They might be trying to take control, but often the turning point comes out of nowhere, so it is a reactionary section of the book. Then we get to the midpoint, which is that shift I mentioned earlier. So maybe new characters are introduced, new information's introduced, there's something that changes the trajectory of the story, and that then puts the protagonist in the position of being able to attack, which is part 3 is the attack. That's when they start becoming more proactive, they're actively trying to bring down the antagonist or fix whatever's wrong in the world. And then we get to the 75% mark, which is the climax. This is the epic final battle, the showdown if you're a sci-fi fantasy writer like me, or if it's romance, this could be like the declaration of love, you know, the running through the airport before it's too late. You know, this is the epic climactic moment. And then finally we have the resolutions. So how all of the chips fall, is that an expression, or am I mixing a couple up? Anyway, it's the aftermath and also tying up all of the loose ends. So what I like about story engineering as opposed to Save the Cat, and to be clear, I do really like Save the Cat. I think it's really helpful for initial brainstorming. I think having these specific suggestions around beats are helpful for thinking of initial ideas. But I do think that it's limited in how far you can go. Whereas story engineering, I really like that there's this clear almost arc or theme of each part of the story, and then within that, at certain points of the story, you have like beats you need to hit or events that need to happen. And these are 25%, which is the turning point or first plot point, he likes to call it. 37.5%, which is the first pinch point. This is a moment when you know, the antagonist rears their ugly head or makes himself known, or you know the threat is looming, the stakes get higher. The midpoint is when you get that new information, it changes the trajectory of the story. 62.5%, another interaction with the antagonist. Then 75% is the climax. Between those 4 parts and those key tentpole moments almost, I find it's a little bit easier to string a story together because it just makes more sense. I don't know why, but for me, I can see like how stories naturally move through those 4 stages, and I feel like there is more cause and effect because, you know, the turning point, everything after that is in response to the turning point. The midpoint, when you shift to the attack, that is in response to the information you get. So rather than just having this random fun and games or bad guys close in because you've been told to put that there because it's that beat, you can think a little bit more organically in that, okay, this has happened, now what are my characters realistically going to do in response to this? Rather than, okay, this has happened, now we've got to have some fun and games. So I don't know if that made sense, but with all of that said, I'm now going to continue playing with the same story, this time looking at the story engineering outline. It has now been 4 weeks since I last looked at this book at all because we're moving countries in just over a week, so things have been busy. When I sat down to get back to it today, what I'd forgotten was that I've actually packed everything I was using for outlining. So the take off your pants, story engineering, Save the Cat, my story clock workbook, they're all in a suitcase, not even a suitcase, in a backpack, so it's really awkward to get everything out. My notepad that I was working in is also in the backpack. So I do still want to get back to this today, but it's going to be like starting from scratch almost because I don't have any of my notes or work that I've done. Having said that, obviously it exists in my head. I remember a lot of what I've done, so I'm hoping that having the memory of everything plus the 1 month break will mean that when I try to tackle the same exercises today, I'll be just more refreshed and hopefully I'll be able to create a more complete storyline. So let's see how this goes. One of the things that I love about doing different plotting exercises is that every time you go back, you discover more about a story. So this time I'm going through it, and I've been obviously writing down everything that's currently stuffed into a backpack, but I've also been thinking of new ideas. So things like maybe there's an existing relationship between the Glass Witch and Kiara's Glass Master, and maybe the rivalry between them is linked to why the Glass Witch wants to go back and destroy everything. So I like that every time I go back to it, I do come up with new ideas. The frustrating thing is not being able to reliably know when all of the gaps will be filled, because I've tried just some brainstorming writing to get some of my thoughts from the last few weeks out. I did the Save the Cat beats again, and then I did a story clock circle. I still have a lot of the same gaps, so I'm not worrying about the B story because B stories aren't really my thing. But fun and games, it's like, okay, well, I know that this is going to be when she's on her journey looking for the witch. I know that there need to be 3 trials before she finds the witch. I don't know what those trials will be. Similarly, like after she's accepted by the witch, I know the witch is going to start training her. She's going to start learning more about the witch's story. She's going to start getting hints that maybe this isn't just like a reclusive glass artisan. Maybe there's something dodgy going on, but I don't know what's going to happen. So I've got these big stretches of the story that are like this, where I know what's meant to happen at a high level, but I don't know what the actual scenes are. And I'm not sure how to fill in those gaps. I don't know if it's something where I just start writing from the beginning, because I do have a few scenes for the beginning now, and then those later bits will become clear as I approach them, or whether I should really try and figure them out now. And I reflect on Powerless because that's the one book where I've successfully done this exercise. I suppose you could say Reciprocal Stalking as well, which was my April Camp Nano project last year, but I didn't end up finishing because it ran into the interview process for my current job and it was a bit too much at once. But both of those books, like, I did all these exercises, I had them planned somewhat when I started, but the plan by all means wasn't complete. And in fact, this is also in the backpack with everything else, but I do have all of my planning stuff from Powerless and Reciprocal Stalking, so maybe I'll show that at some point. But I know there were definitely gaps in the list of scenes I had for Powerless, and some of them I figured out as I went. I just feel like I had more than I have now, though. Like, I feel like I had more individual scenes than I have now for the Glass Witch, but I feel like I have a better understanding of the overall plot of the Glass Witch, like what's happening in each part of the book, even if I don't know the specifics. So it's an interesting position to be in. So there's this thing when you start doing YouTube and you wake up in the morning going, I'm going to be productive and do this challenge I was working on first thing. And then the first time you see yourself for the day is in the viewfinder and you're like, I really should have washed my face and brushed my hair and put on some makeup before doing this. But I've started filming now, so this is what we have. So it has now been another week or so since the last time I filmed, and my husband and I are now in Switzerland. We arrived yesterday, and I obviously have not finished the outline for this book. So I've decided today is the final day. I'm going to do one more exercise, and whatever I've got at the end of that is what I'm going to have before I start writing this book, because this is enough. Like, at this point, yes, life has been busy. Yes, I haven't been able to put as much time towards this exercise as I would like. But at this point, it's been over a month. It's time to start doing some actual writing. So the exercise I'm doing today is Dan Harmon's Story Circle, which I mentioned earlier in the video, which is like a circle diagram where you have 8 key points that your story's meant to hit. What I'm going to be doing a little bit differently, though, is I'll have the story circle for the entire story, which I think I already have based on the exercises I've already done, but I'm also going to do a new circle for each of the 4 parts of the book. And I originally learnt this approach from Tyler Mowry, who's a screenwriter. He has an awesome YouTube channel. He talks a lot about story circle and story structure, and he uses the story circle in this way, in which he has a circle for each part of the story rather than just the overall story. So I'm hoping that this will help me flesh out some of the gaps in each of the parts of the book. I think I mentioned this earlier, but the story circle is a really good complement to the story clock, which is another circular plotting method. Story clock more focuses on mapping out the events in your story and finding symmetry between different parts of the circle, whereas story circle is divided into 8 sections that each need to cover something. Think of it like an 8-sliced pizza. Slice 1 is the character in their comfort zone, so the normal world. Slice 2 is their need or desire. Slice 3 is being put into an unfamiliar situation. Slice 4 is adapting to that situation. Slice 5 is getting what they wanted, but Slice 6 is when they have to pay a price for getting what they wanted. Slice 7 is returning to comfort. Slice 8 is having changed. So even though they're back where they began, something about the character has changed on the journey. So first I looked at the story circle for the book as a whole, which was really fast because I've basically already done the work. Kiara is the main character. What she wants is to be a famous glass artisan. Then getting put into an unfamiliar situation is when these glass statues of girls start appearing in Venice, and she finds one of them and wants to figure out who made it. Then 5 is getting what she wanted, so she discovers who made the statues. It's the Glass Witch, and she is accepted by the Glass Witch to start learning from her. But then she pays a price, which is the Glass Witch is not what she seems. She tricks Kiara into inviting her back to Venice and then heads to Venice with the plan to turn the entire city and everyone in it to glass. Return is Kiara returns to Venice to stop the Glass Witch, and then having changed. I'm just going to leave this blank for now because spoilers. The next step was creating 4 smaller circles for each of the parts of the book. So from story engineering, I already knew the focus of my parts. So part 1 is the setup. This is Kiara's day-to-day life and goals, and we introduce the mystery of these glass statues. Part 2 is her search for the witch. Part 3 is being accepted by and having a mini apprenticeship with the witch. And then part 4 is stopping the witch when she returns to Venice. So to tackle these, I started with filling out the bits I already knew from the macro story circle. Point 1 in all 4 of the circles is obviously Kiara. She is the only point of view character, so she will be the focus for the entire thing. In part 1, the focus is on her wanting to be a famous artisan, but also the mystery of the glass statues. Her getting what she wants is she is invited to work with her glass master on the big display or exhibition they're doing for Carnival, but at the same time, she also gets a clue to who made the statues. So she needs to choose between this dream she's always wanted and this obsessive drive she has to meet the person who made this statue. So she gets what she wanted, which is the invitation to work on the Carnival exhibition, but the cost is that it would cost her finding out who made these statues, and vice versa. She can pursue whoever made these statues, but it's going to cost this opportunity to work at Carnival. And obviously she chooses to pursue the witch and is going to lose her apprenticeship as a result. Part 2, what she wants is to find the person who made the statue, so she embarks on the journey. She gets what she wanted in finding the witch. There is a cost. I think that'll be something around sacrificing her friend who was with her on the journey. I don't think literal sacrifice, he's not going to die at this point, but something around sacrificing their friendship. Then part 3 is the apprenticeship, so a lot of it's learning from the witch, but also discovering the dark secrets of who she is and her power. And the cost here is obviously the witch has this power and she's going to use it to destroy Venice. And then part 4 is stopping the witch. So in all of these, you'll see there are a couple of blank spaces. I'm not sure how some of the story circle points apply to each of the parts of the book, but I do feel like this is a good exercise for getting a more in-depth overview, especially if it's building on the previous exercises. So Save the Cat beat sheet was good for brainstorming some initial scenes, story engineering was good for coming up with the macro structure, and then this story circle exercise is good for filling out the gaps within the story engineering structure. I've now done one last thing for my Glass Witch story, which is transferring everything to this paper with post-its. So this is an exercise from Save the Cat called The Board, I think. And the idea is that you put each of your scenes onto a card and then you can sort of see them visually and arrange them. And I feel like this has some additional benefits beyond doing things like the story circle and story clock and just listing out your scenes, in that you can see where the gaps are. So this is split into 4 rows, one for each part of the book. And you can see part 1 is fairly complete, and then there are gaps in the later parts. I am not too worried about this at this stage. I feel like when I started writing Powerless, it was quite similar. Like I knew what each part would contain, but there were gaps. For instance, one of the big gaps here is I know Kiara and her friend Roberto are going to journey to find the witch. Not really sure what's going to happen on this journey, but we do need probably a couple of scenes in there to pass the time. So there are gaps, but I do feel like I have enough to start writing, which is really exciting. So all in all, my plan isn't as complete as I'd like. However, most of my plans are not as complete as I'd like, and I feel like I do have enough to start writing after doing my favorite exercises from take off your pants, save the cat, story engineering, story clock, and then the story circle. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have a favorite plotting or outlining exercise or methodology, please let me know in the comments below so I can check it out. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I will see you next time. Bye.